Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, officers. Anybody lives in online, so welcome to the police meeting of the Police and Crime Panel. This meeting is being broadcast live to the public via YouTube and will be available for viewing on YouTube after the meeting. Please turn your microphone on when speaking and turn it off when you have finished. A fire alarm test is not scheduled for today, so if the alarm does sound, please exit the room and the Democratic Services on my left will direct you towards the fire exit. Unfortunately, Mr. Matthews, the Police and Crime Commissioner, is not available today for personal reasons, so he's represented by his Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, Oliver Bryan. So good afternoon to you, Oliver, and welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you very much for the welcome.
Okay. I'd also like to welcome again Temporary Chief Constable David Sandow to today's meeting.
Thank you.
Before we begin, I'd like to mention that following the statement made by the Police and Crime Commissioner at the meeting of the 4th of February, the Temporary Chief Constable provided the panel with copies of relevant documentation, which the PCC referred to. These have been published as supplementary reports alongside the agenda and papers for the meeting for the 4th of February. So we'll move on to the agenda. Agenda item 1, the first item on the agenda is declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Do any members have any interest they wish to declare? None, thank you. Just bear a second. Can I just double check? Do you have any interest to declare? Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 2 is a report on the policing precept proposal. A holding report was attached to the agenda, pages 3 to 6, and a supplementary report of the Police and Crime Commissioner has been circulated to panel members and published alongside the agenda papers, and they're pages 3 to 6 in your agenda pack. At the meeting of the 4th of February 2026, the Police and Crime Commissioner presented a proposed increase to the 2026-27 precept by £11 for policing purposes for Band D property. Having reviewed the proposal, the panel resolved to veto the PCC, Police and Crime Commissioner's proposed precept on the grounds that it was too low. A recorded vote was taken of 12 members in at least 2/3 of the panel's total membership, and the vote was unanimous. The motion was carried and the proposed precept was vetoed. The Police and Crime Commissioner was issued with the relevant statutory notice outlining this veto and the reasons for the veto. In consequence, under Regulation 5(3)(b), the Police and Crime Commissioner was required to submit a revised precept higher than the proposal considered. In a report published on the 10th of February 2026, having considered the panel's veto report, the Police and Crime Commissioner proposes to issue a revised council precept of £15 for the 2026-2027 financial year for a Band D property. The panel now has the opportunity to make comments and recommendations on the revised precept, but cannot veto the revised precept. Any comments made and recommendations agreed by the panel will be provided to the Police and Crime Commissioner in writing as soon as possible before the 22nd of February, which is the statutory deadline. The Police and Crime Commissioner must have regard for the panel's second report, respond and publish the response. The Police and Crime Commissioner may then issue the revised precept by the 1st of March or a different precept subject to constraints of Regulation 8(3). Right, just before we move on, I am intending to follow exactly the same procedure that we followed last week, in which part the meeting will be split into 2 parts. First part is for Mr. Bryan to present the Police and Crime Commissioner's latest report. Q&A to follow. We will then invite Temporary Chief Constable David Sandow to comment, and the same applies, a Q&A session with David before you take the vote. Okay, everybody happy with that? Good. Thank you. Right. Anybody questions from anybody for now? We're all okay to proceed. Thank you. Right. Mr. Bryan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and hello everyone. Thank you very much for the warm welcome for the first time that I'll be able to do this. And I'll just add a bit of context that Rupert's youngest is in hospital recovering from major surgery, hence he's not able to be here, and he sends his apologies. I'll assume that everyone has read the new reports. Obviously, we've taken the panel's feedback from last time into account. We went away, had more discussions, and felt that £15, as you, the elected representatives of your ward, had said that people would be prepared to pay that. We have come back and said as such. That will eliminate the remaining deficit in the chief's budget. And basically, that's all I have to update you on. So I'd welcome any comments or questions.
Thank you, Oliver. Members, any questions at all? Mr. Harrison.
Just to thank Oliver, we only wish the Crime Commissioner could have been so brief. However, here we are today. I think it's appropriate and correct, and I'm grateful and thank him for that. And it makes an embarrassing moment in time that we've all had. But if obviously we can move forward and just get on with the job in hand. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Any other members? Oh, Councillor Dave.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report. I think it's really important that the PCC hears and listens to what the elected members have to say. And it's really good. It's very nice to see that the PCC has really heard our views and taken account of our comments earlier on. And I read the report. The report basically points out the views of the PCC, why he thought what he wanted to do in the first place, and that he has considered our viewpoints, and then has come up with the current proposal. I welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Lloydell.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It would be unfair to ask questions of Oliver with regards to the PCC's report. But again, I think it needs to go on record, I think, that to say that the panel here today works. And the scrutiny of what's happening or what happened last week and the paperwork that we received and the challenges that the panel made a big impact on where we were going to go in the future. And I think it's time that we pull together and ensure that the police are properly funded, both locally and nationally, to ensure that they can do the job that they're paid to do in a very, very difficult and changing world. And I think it needs to go on record that panel system does work and that it's made a positive outcome today. Thank you, Chairman.
Well said, Mr. Lloydell. Thank you for that.
Chair, may I just add to that as well? Sorry to interrupt. No, we completely agree. We're unified in that. That's why the process is as it is. The only thing I'd like to add is that some of the points that Rupert made, I don't think have been nullified by the change. There are problems for the medium to long term, and that is still rests with central government. And we're still committed to fighting for fairer funding. Leicestershire has now dropped, I believe, to 6th lowest funded force in the country, and we are paying more for our policing services. So that fight does go on, and as central government mixes around with the police amalgamation or bigger forces, and they take away potentially from more neighbourhood policing, that's only going to get stronger. So I think a lot of the arguments that he made are still valid, and we will nevertheless have to put that case to central government.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. I think we're all very aware of the funding issues for Leicestershire and Rutland. Therefore, it didn't make any sense to come forward with a lower than beneficial precept in the first place, which is the unanimous opinion of this panel. So anyway, I think Mr. Woodman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this, Oliver, but I was just wondering about the thought process, because obviously I think we established that putting up by £2 would have filled the black hole. Why the jump from 11 to 15 based on the PCC's arguments in the first place?
Oliver?
Well, I'll always do my best to answer on Rupert's behalf. Pretty much because we thought that was appropriate. You know, there's greater zeal in a convert than someone who starts off down the road, and this is the appropriate budget to be doing. to some extent splitting hairs over the £2, as far as I'm concerned, it was worth going to the 15. As for the original decision, like I say, because of the funding problems there are for the police, it seems that the central government is more than happy to keep offsetting its plans onto the local taxpayer more and more and more, even at the same time as they're centralising more power and potentially taking away from neighbourhood policing with bigger forces. So it was more a warning shot, if you like, that this can't keep happening. If the government has lofty plans to amalgamate forces and centralise, then it needs to come up with an appropriate funding formula for that, not just expect taxpayers to continually pay more. And I think there is a sort of growing base of people that are beginning to ask that out there in the communities.
I think every elected member around this table would agree with that. However, all public authorities are funded by the taxpayer one way or another, whether it's direct or indirect taxation. And I reiterate, it therefore makes it illogical for the Police and Crime Commission to put forward a precept that would automatically underfund the police, both today and for the future. And without putting anybody on the spot, some of that evidence was quite clear in the commentaries last time. So, Ellie, you were next.
Thank you very much, Chair, and obviously welcome the changed position. Do want to just echo what Oliver said, though. Obviously, there is still a funding deficit, 8 million in 27-28 and 14 million in 29-30, and therefore the pressure to sort of transform the service still and review your operating model is still very, very real and visceral. I think for me, I still go back. It's something that I mentioned at the last meeting, was the 3.7 million that was being put into the OPCC's own prevention fund, and I really would like to see some transparency. I think it would be appropriate for the board to have some more detail on how that money is going to be spent, and I hope, I mean, I don't know whether there may be some principles that we need to draft up around how that money is spent. I mean, one thing for me particularly is making sure that it's spent on the force or in the public sector with our public sector partners, and that it's not being given to private sector, where the longevity of the impact might not last beyond Rupert's, Mr. Matthews, sorry, term of office. So I think maybe some principles around that would be good, and also stuff like, you know, making sure that the money is spent locally and not somehow taken down to London. I think that would be really good to see some strong principles around it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Ollie, is that something you can kind of take back to the office and have a play around with for us?
Yeah, absolutely. As of yet, it's an intention, so it's essentially going into a pot, but things may well change. There are no strict plans on that yet, and of course the Police and Crime Panel will know in due course if that changes, and certainly your comments have been received.
Mr. Loyal, I think. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Gail or Ola.
Thank you very much. I too am extremely pleased to see that the Police and Crime Commissioner has taken notice of what this panel was saying, and for two reasons. One, had the original paper gone through, the cumulative effect on the budget would have just made a bad situation far, far worse. And I think it's incumbent on all of us, when we're working with budgets in our various guises, that we think to the medium term at the very least, if not the longer term. And the second reason is, quite understandably, the level of visible policing in my neck of the woods in Rutland is lower than it is in other parts of our patch. I understand that totally. My residents don't necessarily, even though I try my best to explain it to them, but I think any risk of that diminishing would have upset them enormously. And the impact on council tax for us, frankly, is relatively limited, given that Rutland residents pay the highest council tax in the country anyway. So it would have been a marginal difference. So for those reasons, can I thank the Police and Crime Commissioner for listening to the wisdom of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That's very kind of you. I can't remember. Kevin, do you have your hand up a bit again? I think you were first, Kevin.
I admire, Oliver, your dedication and support for the OPCC and your comments with regards to, I've read his statements regarding this, but I have to say that going through it as a chairman of an audit committee and looking at papers measured against the audit papers that I've got, if I share it, I would suggest if you carried on in that vein, the auditors would have had some serious questions to ask. And I would have suggested that the terminology that they would use is that you would need to do something about it sooner rather than later. So it would have, if it had gone through, there would have been some real serious audit implications for the PCC and then the panel. That's a given because I've checked it and I've really gone through it, and I've found it quite difficult to understand why that would have been allowed to continue based on what the audit has to do and the comments they make and the recommendations they'll give an opinion. I think that opinion would be quite severe. So I admire what you're saying and your support, but I think in what the panel's decisions have made is the right one for everybody. But thank you anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Doward, please.
Thank you, Chair. Please do extend our sympathies to PCC. And it's never easy to step in at short notice and take in questions that you probably weren't expecting to take. But a couple of observations followed by a question more than anything. It's in terms of, I think the funding scenario for Leicestershire and forces like ours has always been an issue, I think, in terms of whichever further political party has been in power. But I think the £11 reduction, £11 precept in the short term would have left the force very vulnerable. And I think the future organisation of the forces nationally, I think papers are still to come out, so we don't know what's going to happen there. But in the short term, what would have been an impact, and I think that needs to be considered. And I think that was one of the kind of motivations for the panel. And secondly, in a week, turnaround is great, really, from 11 to 15. And sometimes people kind of drag their feet on that one, but it's a good compromise. And I think people that we represent will be quite happy in a sense of the increase, because that assures nothing beats safety and security. And this will give assurances. But in terms of my question, I'm just thinking in terms of our position, as in the PCC position, in terms of partnerships such as community safety and youth justice. I'm just wondering whether they'll be able to, I'm not expecting an answer now, but able to retain their funding, and also preventative activity, crime reduction, offender management, are all kind of areas that are relevant. And sometimes when you're making decisions, these areas are, easier, not easier to focus on, but we just need assurances that these will not be focused upon and reductions seen. Thanks, Chair.
No, I completely appreciate that, and everyone around this room knows that one of the worst things that can happen during a budget is any uncertainty for funding streams, etc. So we will have to get back to you on that, but always seek to minimise any risk or threat of lack of funds.
With an £11 precept proposal to start with. Councillor Butcher, please.
I'd like to thank the PCC for his change in his decision, because after my question was answered by the temporary chief constable, our area was, quite worried, because we are delivering really well in Melton Mowbray at the minute. So we did have big concerns. So we really welcome this change.
Thank you, Sharon. Mr. Mullaney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was really just to say, obviously, we welcome that the police commissioner has reached this agreement with the rest of the panel and with the police and with everyone else who was taking the view that we took. There's obviously challenges facing Leicestershire Police going forward, as we've heard with the funding. The very disappointing news that it looks like we're going from the 7th worst funded to the 6th worst funded, lowest funded in the country. And then also, of course, there is the uncertainty that's caused at the moment with the whole issue of police mergers and the fact that we're likely to be merged into a much bigger police force, and obviously the risks that carries, particularly for areas like my own, which are sort of rural and small town like Hinckley and Bosworth, that it might lead to a reduction in police cover. So there's really serious issues regarding the funding of Leicestershire Police and the future of Leicestershire Police going forward. And I think the best thing that we can do as a police panel, as police and police commissioner, is obviously work together and be as united as possible to bang the drum for Leicestershire, the police force locally, and for the residents that depend on it. So I think going forward, if we can all work more cooperatively, as seems to be the result of the police commissioner changing his mind on this issue, then that's a positive thing. So I welcome that.
Thank you, Michael. Liz.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'd like to extend my sympathies to Rupert Matthews and particularly his daughter. I do hope that she makes a smooth recovery. And thank you, and thank you, Oliver, as well, because it seems that you were one of the main players in the redesign. But the change in the precept doesn't completely cure the problem. We still have a very large deficit to cover. And I do want to echo Ellie Kelvin's remarks. I am concerned about the prevention fund and exactly what's going to happen with it, because at the minute the purpose is clear, but how it's going to be spent, I really feel that this panel needs more clarity on that. And also, the original concern that you had was that more vulnerable people who didn't have high incomes would be disadvantaged by a high council tax. And we've raised the council tax, but I would hope that you would consider that there is still this shortfall, and that it is still those people who will be hardest hit. We have got this gap that we need to overcome, and I don't think that we can ask for ward level of officer visibility. Can we ask for numbers to this panel? Or are we not able to? Is that more direct policing stuff?
Well, officially it's operational.
Operational.
We can certainly ask for the information to be brought back to us. David may wish to comment himself, and I'll let him when we get to David. Not now, David, but just to future. Okay, you happy done?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Woodwist, please.
Thank you, Chair. I can't really say anything that hasn't been said already, but I would like to register my gratitude and also extend my sympathies to Rupert's daughter as well. And I think from the population of Harbour District, at least, the certainty of funding for this year will be very gratefully received. So thank you.
Any further questions from the panel? Mr. Harrison.
Thank you. I'd like to raise the issue of this cash that you've got stored away. Really, any money stowed away would be better directed to the police, who are the overall people of responsibility for our street safety, as opposed to giving it to organisations that probably seem as though they're vulnerable or might need help. But I'd sooner see more coppers on the beat and help build the security of that force going forward would be paramount, because I think that's the most important thing for all of us. We want to think that the streets are safe and the people that we meet and see and represent feel safer. And it's very much within your hands. I know you've said you'd bring it to us, and I hope you do. And we can see a full picture of all of what's been held and what you've got stored away to think how it could be better used. Because at the end of the day, we know the term has an ending. So, why store cash if we could be helping the police and build a better, safer and secure place for people to live in other than in your storage box or bank. So that'd be my concern, Oliver, that, you know, surpluses, if it's available, instead of pet hobby thoughts or organisations, I can't see any better organisation than the police force, who really, this is what it's all about. And so if you've collected funds as in the role Rupert and yourself share, well, that's fine, but the surplus surely, and particularly now, you know, there is an end line, an end date. I mean, well, I would hope that when we get a chance to talk about it, it could be directed to a purpose that would create more advantages for the public and the taxpayer than anything else. So it's a lot of sort of nudge and saying, look, think about it, because it's serious. They're still down at the bottom. We'd like them at the top. Not that your contribution to put them on the top, but it would certainly help them to be able to see how they can perform even better. And, you know, when I hear of the statistics, stats on how quickly they do things, and, you know, stabbing at midday and 6 o'clock somebody's arrested, and also they're doing a lot of good work that we don't normally see or hear, apart from when we had that briefing the other day from the chief. So I think we ought to be mindful of that, how we have an opportunity to make it a bit more secure in all of this uncertainty that's happening at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I think I understand what you're suggesting or asking for. So the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner has potentially budget surplus and reserves, and your query is, how are they going to be invested before the end of the office existing in that? Have I got that right? Yeah. Okay. So I'm sure the officers and Oliver will take that away to see what the MTFP looks like future-wise. Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Lloydell?
Sorry to, okay. We as a panel, we can put recommendations forward for the future. I think that you've just hit on the head with regards to the office of PCC is going to be done away with. Nothing to do with you guys. I never supported it in the first place, but I'm glad it's going. But in the meantime, while we're here, is it possible? There's two things here. We had a report last time about a chairman for the, was it called, please?
Criminal Justice.
Pardon?
You're on about the Criminal Justice?
Yeah, Criminal Justice, the chairman. That used to be the job of the PCC, and then it went to Mr. Nixon because of various things that happened. What I'm suggesting is that should be reconsidered, and it should be the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner that should do that, as it was originally in the papers from government. It says the Office of PCC should do it. So that's that bit. The second bit is we then talked about a potential Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, and that's no disrespect in any way, shape or form, because we're in a budget situation, a financial situation. Again, let's reconsider that and actually not have another one due to the budget constraints that we've got working towards the demise of the PCC anyway. Equally, a report should come back with regards to the activities of the PCC when he's travelling around Leicestershire, Rutland and other places, and the publicity that giving bits of money out and everything else, that perhaps maybe the money for that could be redirected more positively to support the police in some of the activities. I'm sorry to bore you, but I'll give you an example of.
Well, if I may, Mr. Lloydell, I think we're straying into future.
Okay, no,
future speak here.
I think you got the gist of it.
Yeah, the budget is proposed and set, and the precept is proposed and set. Today we are here to approve or not approve the revised precept. But I think the points you raised, Kevin, I know some of those are very passionate issues, are things that we can bring back to the panel in the future to discuss in more detail. Yeah, Damien?
Yeah, just add some clarity that the panel haven't got the power to veto the precept again, so the panel aren't here to approve. They can support or not support. Just
thank you.
Just wanted to make that clear. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before I wrap this little bit up? Okay, so Chairman's prerogative, I guess. I think what I would say, is I was slightly disappointed to read the revised proposal and the statements in here, because it principally says, I was right, but I heed the advice of the panel. And I find that slightly disingenuous. There's a significant lot of experience around this panel and who voiced their opinion very eloquently last meeting. So I find it a little bit disingenuous to say, I was right, because that means we were all wrong. Okay, but because this is in the public domain, okay, I have a query for you, which you may or may not be able to answer today. Certainly Kira and Claire are very aware of my interest and passion for statistics and data. Section 6.12 says, I requested that a weighted average be calculated across all respondents based on the number of respondents for each rate of increase from 0p to the maximum. This calculation shows the weighted average response of an uplift of a precept of £9.90. I have the survey responses in front of me. 865 out of the 1,544 respondents, so 56%, were in favour of either matching last year's, which was £14, or paying more, up to plus 30 pence, for this year. So I'm really curious, because I would not want misinformation to be in the public domain, how that weighted average statement here is derived, because for the life of me, I can't work it out, and statistics is one of my pet hobbies. So please, Oliver, if you can, or it was something we will ask you to respond back to the panel with.
I don't think anyone would doubt your love of statistics, Chair. As for that one, I will probably hand over to Claire on that one.
Really happy to provide the workings, but I think what you'll find is that although there was a higher percentage for the higher increases, those increases were something along the lines of 26p, 24p, 22p. They're largely offset by the huge number of people, or the 31% that picked for 0 pence. So because you've got 0 pence at one end of the scale and then 20 something pence at the other end of the scale, and you've got a lot of people down here and then people up here, it weights it in that direction. But really happy to provide you with the workings later.
Thank you, Claire. I understand what you're saying, but I would still like to see the formulae behind it. You know, not everybody in the well-known universe is a statistician, but that clearly says that, you know, it's £9.90. So I just would not want there to be misleading information in the public domain, as you will appreciate. So I would be fascinated on what that data set looked like and how it came forward. But that's, I think, is just something to send in to us. Okay, right. We will pause there for the Police and Crime Commissioner's office, unless anybody has any further questions. Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a really short point. Oliver, we have assumed that it's you because it says Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner. I am more than aware that we have more than one, and I just wondered if in future reports we could make it clear which one it is.
That's a fair comment. Right, thank you. Okay, so Temporary Chief Constable David Sandell, anything you wish to say, sir?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to thank the panel. I think that actually the scrutiny you provided, both to me and the Police and Crime Commissioner, you obviously, it was quite clear that you'd gone into some of the detail and had an understanding, but it was the understanding of the impact on the ground, which I think was really, really important. So generally I say thank you, but I also say that on behalf of the Police Federation and Unison, who represent most of my staff and officers who appreciate it, but I also know the feedback from actually a lot of members of the public back into the force, especially those people working on the beats on the front line, has been really positive as well. And obviously, again, we really appreciate the fact that the Police and Crime Commissioner has changed the decision, and that is appreciated. I also think that you've covered the main areas that I wanted to cover. Is this is the first step. When you look at the financial challenge that we've got, and as the Deputy VCC has outlined, actually the funding for us is dropping again. But when you look, and I outlined it, the metropolitan type issues that we have in this county, it's pretty concerning in terms of the funding that we're getting, in terms of the threat and risk that we hold, and the response that we put in place. So, I'm certainly extremely proud of the people that work in the organisation who go above and beyond for communities, and I know that commitment will continue. But we certainly need more people, not less. But you'll recognise our target operating model review has already been commenced, ready to start in 13 months' time. The reality is, if those budgets do not change, there'll be further cuts. And the other element I just want to highlight is that whilst the precept decision of the £15 has still closed the budget deficit for this year, which is really, really good news, and we're genuinely very pleased around that. I'm thankful for it. It still means £3.5 million worth of resources being taken out of the organisation, including 1 million of police staff, £500,000 of police officers on the 31st of March. So, even though it's in a good stage, we are still a shrinking organisation, whilst, as I outlined last time, that demand is going up. But I'm more than happy to answer any questions that could support the panel in their role. So thank you.
I think the one thing we're all united on is government needs to get the funding formula for a lot of the issues and provision services in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, because we're getting a bit fed up of being the worst funded. However, any questions for the temporary chief? Gail.
Thank you. As a substitute on this panel, I may be asking a question that everybody else knows the answer to, so may I apologise in advance?
All questions are good questions, Gail.
Thanks. There was a discussion earlier about the prevention fund, and I think we all understand in this context what we mean by prevention. But my question is, if that funding was given directly to you, would the police force, albeit in partnership with the voluntary sector, local government and so on, be able to deliver what the outcomes are expected from that project?
That's a question way beyond mine. David.
So we're a neighbourhood-based police force. We really value that. If the prevention activity that we want to do, and we are doing in partnership with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, needs to be invested into where you make the local impact. I would want to make sure that we've got an evidence base that we often use through our violence reduction network, which all the partners across the boroughs and the councils as well are engaged in. That's the way forward. So whatever activity we invest in needs to make sure that it's completely evidence-based. We have to make sure that we know we're going to get an impact from it, and we need to track that impact. I really welcome the panel's comments from a number of people around invest that money into the force, because we can do that prevention activity, and that helps maintain some of the resources we've got, but they also come with statutory powers, and it's the statutory powers that my PCSOs, that I've just increased the statutory powers of the PCSOs to, in response to making sure some of the local concerns, to give them more powers to do things on the ground, but also having the officers out on the street. So yes, we'd be able to deliver it, and we want to support that.
And I thank you for that answer. It's some years since I was actively involved in policing, and I'm glad to see that there's been good progress in that area since I was, so thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Did you have your hand up? You did. Councillor David, and then Ellie, I think you were next. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for your report. In terms of in relation, following from what Mr. Harrison said in terms of the budget for the OPCC, obviously, this is quite a simple question, to be honest. In terms of the OPCC budget, we know it's coming to an end 28, 20, whenever. And there are budgets there. And obviously, I'd like to be assured that any money that we can, as a Leicestershire Police, can obtain from the OPCC, because the government will take it back evidently anyway. So if there's any discussions around that, whether there's any surpluses that are there, because I know bed mattresses and little shoebox have been mentioned about where we hide them, but whether that money can be transferred to the Leicestershire Police as an option. And secondly, you mentioned the metropolitan challenges. Maybe it's a subject for another meeting, but I'm quite interested in that because this is in addition to normal business, isn't it?
So thank you. I think it's rare that we actually have the chief in the panel meeting. So David, do you want to respond to the metropolitan comment?
Yeah, I just think it's the reality of some of the challenges that we've got. When I speak to colleagues from across the country, they don't have some of the challenges that we have in terms of the makeup of a city and county, the deprivation, the football clubs, 3 universities, the fact that some of the diversity, which we are all really, really proud of, but it brings its own challenges around it that we've seen in recent years. The expectation from different communities as well on policing is very different in other places. We're very embedded with our community, something that we don't want to change, but it does create greater demands upon us, and we can definitely look at that. Just in terms of the crime types that we see, we work really, really hard to have a low murder rate, low level of serious violence, but there is still serious violence on the street. We had a really tragic murder last week in the city. And again, they're the things that we want to stop and prevent. But when they do happen, it's the amount of resource that you're having to put in. And also the protest activity that we're having is taking so many local officers away from local areas, because we're having to put so many more officers on the ground to manage and support legal protest and making sure that it remains legal. So some of those are challenges. In relation to your second part around the question around the money coming to the force, of course, I'd welcome that. And I'm bound to say that as the Chief Constable, aren't I? That I think it definitely going to be a benefit into the police. In relation to the budget and where it goes, though, I can't give you any comment on that because that's all managed through the Police and Crime Commissioner. I do not have sight or the full details of where those budget elements in terms of the OPCC budget go.
Thank you, Chief. And I think it's the point Mr. Harrison raised there about what does the future of MTFP look like, and with government plans, for want of a better terminology, invest it, spend it, or lose it is undoubtedly going to be part of the agenda moving forward, because we don't know what the future funding formula is going to look like, or the future police force, or anything else for that matter. So yeah, I think the panel would support that mission.
I just think what the panel did recently, focusing on now in the next couple of years, is what's in our control. I think where the national changes, a lot of them are putting into a second parliament. They're going to require real significant investment, planning, work. So I think that the real impact is going to be at the sort of national level in terms of national policing structure. I think the local bit will be a long way off, because they've got to change the infrastructures, the computer systems, those type of things that are really practical, that we know from Police Scotland, and when they went through their changes, there's a lot of learning from that. So therefore I do think, concentrate for us in Leicestershire, because I think also, if you're going to be involved in negotiation in terms of what the future looks like, if you're doing it from a really strong position, performance-wise, financially as well, then you have a much stronger say in any changes that are going to come, which are going to impact on our communities in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland.
Thank you, Chief. Right, I didn't spot whether it's Patricia or Ellie was first. So, yeah, okay, Patricia.
I guess it's just the comment, and I just wanted it noted. Previously at panel, we have mentioned commission services, preventative services that have been commissioned, and I'm really looking forward to April to hear about the impact, the evaluation. And I think I can say for all the members in the panel, we've always spoke about, okay, it's great commissioning all these preventative services, but what is the impact? How is that improving our streets? How is that improving the relationships we're having with, whether it be young people or adults, or the vulnerable kind of clientele? So just again, something for the PCC office that I look forward to hearing about.
Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take this time, because we this opportunity really to thank David and the wider force for the work that they do. You mentioned earlier about the work you've done to sort of build and establish relationships with different communities across the LLR footprint, and that is certainly bearing fruit, and I've seen a huge impact of that in the city. I will say, despite the stabbing that you mentioned in the city centre, as the chair of the RCSP, I will say that our figures on crime in the city centre are going down dramatically. And I'm not talking like 3 or 4%, I'm talking about 20%, 25% in certain cases. And the work that's been done by that city centre team is absolutely phenomenal, obviously in partnership with others, but it is phenomenal. And I think Councillor Harrison touched on a really interesting point just about more boots on the street. And in fact, actually, we know from experience like this that actually one of the reasons that crime in the city centre is going down is because we have had more policing hours, and there has been more visibility, and that clearly works as prevention in and of itself, just actually having people out and about. Just following both Councillor Harrison's and Councillor Waller's comments, actually about the prevention fund. I wondered whether we say we're not approving today's budget. We signal whether we're in favour or not. But I was wondering whether we could make the recommendation that the OPCC office relook at that £3.7 million that I was talking about earlier, and relook at whether that would be best delivered through the existing prevention mechanisms that exist in partnership between the OPCC, the PCC, the police force, and those broader public sector organisations. I just think that would make quite a good recommendation that they relook at the possibility of giving that money directly to the police. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Very fortunately, and I've just checked, because Damien is clearly typing very fast here. It does say here in brackets, the panel will need to reach a consensus LDD or wish to make further recommendations. So I think there's some bits to be noted and for the office to take away as to what that clarity looks like at the next meeting in April. Any other questions? Sorry, Ellie.
I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity for it to be a formal recommendation. So can I just ask whether we've got a seconder and we can agree that?
Everybody well, yeah, you got yeah, you got lots of support for that one, Ellie. Okay. Sorry. Well, take your pick. There's lots of people seconding it. Yeah, take your pick. Okay. All right. Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to take us back to the subject of money that may be left over at the end of the term of the PCC. Can we take it away to confirm what will actually happen with that? As we know, with the councils, there may be a structural order notice, which will then prevent it being paid. Is the intention then for it to be passed on to the council officers that will take over at the end, or does it go back to the police? So just have some certainty over that, so then we can advise going forwards.
I'm not sure we need a recommendation, but I think we can certainly have it recorded as a request to bring that information forward, because that was it fits with Councillor Harrison's, it fits with Ellie's, it fits with Councillor Daywood's. What does that future bit? Kira?
That information is not available yet, unfortunately. We've not been told what the future is going to look like for and what that money is going to do, what's going to happen with that reserves and things like that. So. And
there lives the world that we're all living in at the moment. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, isn't it, currently in local government and restructures and everything. Liz?
Thanks, Chair. Chief, going to take advantage of the fact that you're here at the minute. The panel has concerns about call handling, safeguarding, neighbourhood visibility, etc. You have shown, or that it has been shown in Appendix 1, paragraph, page 27, that there will be savings, including reductions in police staff roles, senior posts, etc. Is any modelling taken place that will show how that might impact on these features that we're keen on?
Chief?
Yeah, just to give you the reassurance in relation to those, we've continued with the support of the Police and Crime Commission to invest an additional £1 million worth of resources into our contact centre, because we want to improve that. The risk is whether we can afford to carry on doing it, and we'll be working with the Police and Crime Commissioner to see how that can remain embedded and in place, because we recognise and we know from all the data, if we reduce the amount of people that are sat in the control room answering the phone, I can tell you how many minutes it will take to answer the phone, but our data is really quite strong in this area. To be able to do it. So that's a risk. It won't be a risk for the next year because of the decision with the precept going up to £15. That will remain. It's a problem in 13 months' time, because we're going to have to make some really tough decisions. In relation to our safeguarding, again, we're looking to strengthen it, in particular around children. Obviously, we just had the joint inspection with the county social services. We have do a lot of good work with the city as well. And we want to carry on really focusing on making sure that we can respond to vulnerable children. So whilst we're reducing resources in certain areas, we know we've got to invest in others because of the threat and risk. And what we've tried to do is take out the police staff resources in areas where they have the less direct impact on the public. And that's what we've achieved. So the areas that you just highlighted, we can show where the people have come from, but they're what we've tried to do is have really effective review where we are with where we've got around the vacancies, then reuse different vacancies into different posts, and then take one out from where we think we can manage it. But there is a service impact on some of the areas, but none of them are in those sort of direct areas that you've just highlighted, Councillor.
Thank you, Chief. And I think we're taking the opportunity, but officially the panel's here to scrutinise the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and his work, not the police, but we do get to kind of scrutinise the police through the Commissioner. So thank you, Chief. Right, any other comments, questions? Councillor Lloydell?
Yeah, just an observation really and a comment. Again, from a district point of view, both the first two Police and Crime Commissioners were accompanied by the Chief. If the Chief couldn't come, the Deputy Chief came. And the reasoning behind that was, of course, was that any question from the panel could be directed through the Police and Crime Commissioner, but the answer could be through the Chief because he's here and he was able to answer it and stop all the, can you go back, find out, then a report comes back to the next meeting. So it was quite positive and it worked quite well. Plus the fact it harmonised the fact that the two are working together. They're too busy, I say. I mean, maybe that's something that should be considered towards now it's becoming winding down a bit to help members out of the panel. I know it certainly helped previous members of the panel, it certainly helped me because the answers was forthcoming straight away. You knew what it was going to be. Any actions that might come from that was already recorded, come back the next time, this is what's been done. And it worked perfectly well. Whether that's something you want to consider in the future, I don't know. I don't want to put extra work on anybody, but having that experience and the working together and the harmony together, it really did work properly. But I'll just share that with you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Slightly off-piste as to why we're here today, but the ability for the Chief to attend is entirely at the behest of the Commissioner, so we can pick that up as a request of the Commissioner at the April meeting and make a note here potentially. I remember those days, Kevin, and some of the other panel members do. Liz?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on Kevin's point that time is money. We very much appreciate you all being here and being here for both meetings, and how much money we would have saved with everyone around the table if we'd only had to do this one.
Right, thank you, Liz. Any other questions, comments at all from the panel? Okay, sorry, Councillor Budget.
Yeah, to the Deputy, Oliver, if to do with things to do with prevention, obviously there is a cost saving there if the prevention works really well. So I think that's why we need more detail, because the right schemes obviously say police time, courts, everywhere, it has a knock-on effect. So I think that is really important that we get a bit of a breakdown from what you've done previously and what you want to do this year as well.
Okay, so that's again, it's a bit future thinking, so we'll pick most of these up at the April meeting, I suggest. But Oliver and the team will be able to take it back and know what we'll be looking for anyway. Right, I'll go try again. Any further questions? Right, okay, so I think first and foremost, I think on behalf of the panel, we will all wish Mr. Matthews' daughter a very speedy and full recovery. Clearly the panel is very pleased that Mr. Matthews has recognised the feeling of this panel and the scrutiny of this panel and has increased the precept to £15. I do worry, personally. I've seen a lot of inbound emails. My colleagues may have well seen inbound emails, people that were quite dissatisfied with the Commissioner's proposal for £11. And it's not for me to comment on the force, but I would imagine that there's a bit of discontent there as well. So I do worry that there may have been a bit of an issue now about trust and respect and confidence of the decision making of the Commissioner, but that's with Mr. Matthews to recover that moving forward. Right, members, you now need to reach consensus as to whether you are in support of the revised precept or wish to make further recommendations. We've got the recommendation fairly, everyone's happy. So, members, are you in support of the revised precepts as presented today and in your papers? Anybody going to say yes? No? Put your hands up. Can we take a vote on hands? So that's unanimous. Everybody's in agreement. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Oliver and the team. We got there in the end. It was the right decision, and the panel, I'm going to say, they're all very grateful. We did. Yeah. So the final bit is the date of the next meeting is scheduled for the 21st of April at 2026. And we will close the meeting there at 14:54. Thank you, everybody. Safe travels home.